Today I want to talk about her central apnea and kind of the scary ride of the last 12, well, really now 18 months. When Tessie was born, she was pretty much the perfect baby. She's the sort of baby that you kind of dream of having. At the start, she just slept. She slept perfectly. If I had put her down and let her sleep, she would have slept for over 12 hours a night. And I discovered this one night when I did put her down in her bassinet to sleep, and she slept through the night and terrified me when I was a new mom and I was tired. I just had my 5th C-section and woke up and realized that I had slept through the night and she had slept through the night and hadn't woken me up. And I spoke with her pediatrician, and with Maggie, who was also a very good sleeper. I had talked to her doctors, and they had basically just said, oh, she's a good sleeper, just enjoy it, get all the sleep that you can. With Tessie's pediatrician, she's like, no, you need to set your alarm. Set your alarm every 3 to 4 hours, wake up, feed her, she needs to eat. And so with Tessie, that's what we had to do. We had to wake her up and feed her, and I would make her eat, and she would immediately go back to sleep. She would try to go back to sleep when she was eating. She did not want to be awake. And that was pretty much the first 6 months of her life. We would wake her up, and she would eat, and she would go back to sleep. And when she was 6 months old, I was taking her into her doctor's appointments and saying, she is sleeping 20 hours a day. Those 4 hours a day are the hours when she is awake, because I'm waking her up, and she's eating, and she's awake for just a little bit of time, and then she goes back to sleep. And there were, I'd say, 5 pediatricians, because there were different pediatricians in the practice, and you'd get different doctors depending on when you made the appointment. And so I took her in. And also when the other kids would go to their appointments, I'd go in and say, hey, I have a question for you. And one of the nurses at the practice mentioned, because she was sleeping so much, mentioned the possibility of apnea. So then I started watching really, really closely. And I did start seeing her not breathing. And I mentioned that in the appointments, saying, hey, she's sleeping 20 hours in a 24-hour period, and I've seen her stop breathing. Could this be apnea? And they would say, well, she was 39 and a half weeks along when she was born. She was 8 pounds, 12 ounces. It's basically statistically impossible. There's no way she has apnea. And after I'd had about 5 doctors say that, I believed it, and I pretty much disbelieved what I was seeing. But because of the developmental delays that we were seeing, she was referred to a neurologist, which I think happened a lot faster because of the delays that her older sister had. And when we went to see the neurologist, she fell asleep during his exam. At the time, he'd started to kind of say, she can't be sleeping that much, she's awake right now. And I turned around and said, look at her. And she had fallen asleep on the floor in this room when I put her down to talk to him. And he got up and went over and looked at her, and he sat back down and brought up the possibility of apnea. And I said, yeah, I brought that up to other doctors, and all of the other doctors said it's really unlikely. And he said, well, do you want to go on guessing, or do you want to know? And I said, I want to know. So he wrote the referral for her to have a sleep study, and the sleep study place called us, and it was a couple months out, which felt like such a long time. And then after about a month, we got a call that they had an opening that night. And of course we took it, and I took her in. And that night seemed totally uneventful to me. They didn't have any cribs. It wasn't really a place. It wasn't a children's hospital, so it wasn't a place that was set up for babies. So they had a big bed, and they had me sleep in the bed next to her. And I didn't see her have any events that night. In the morning, the tech came in and said to me, try not to worry. A lot of babies outgrow this. And so that was the only clue I had, that maybe she had seen something, and something was out of the ordinary. And so we went home, and we didn't hear anything. And for a couple weeks, we didn't hear anything. And then Tessie and I were in St. Louis for an autism study when the phone rang, and I picked it up, and it was her neurologist who was on the phone, and I recognized his voice right away, and I had a bad feeling because it was actually him and not his nurse. She was my 3rd kid seeing him, and he had never called. He wanted me to take her to the hospital right away, and I told him we were out of the state, and asked if it was really, really important or if it could possibly wait. And he gave me information to tell the doctor while we were there, and said that she had central apnea and basically to bring her straight in when we got back. And so when we got back, we brought her in and brought her to a pulmonologist. And when the pulmonologist saw the sleep study and saw that she had had 45 central apneas, which weren't the hugest concern, she stopped breathing 45 times. Her brain had basically stopped her breathing 45 times for more than 20 seconds. But that was not what scared them the most. The thing that scared them the most were the 136 times that she had had shallow breathing episodes. She'd had 136 hypopneas when her breathing was so shallow that her oxygen levels went down into the 70s. And that's what scared the doctors, and that's what caused the pulmonologist to send us immediately to the pediatric intensive care unit for monitoring, where she underwent a 24-hour EEG, and where they told us that everything was absolutely normal. And that was when it got really scary. We were there for 4 days, and she was totally monitored for 4 days, and for those 4 days, everything was normal, which was great because she looked like this perfectly healthy baby, and everyone was baffled because you have this horrible, horrible sleep study, which echoed what I was seeing at home, and that kind of echoed the developmental delays we were seeing, because she had these developmental delays that she still has. But while we were in the pediatric ICU, they had her hooked up to a machine, and every single time her respirations got below 6 breaths per minute, an alarm would go off. And the alarm would not wake her up, but it would rouse her enough that she would breathe. And that's what happens now. She has a monitor, and when that monitor goes off, she 99% of the time will take a breath. And that other 1% of the time, I've got to get up and shake her and get her to breathe. 99% of the time, it works on its own, and she doesn't even really need me most of the time if she has her monitor on, which is great. But it wasn't great when she was in the ICU, because it made the doctors think that she didn't have central apnea, and they wrote on her chart, does not have central apnea, and sent that back to her regular doctor, and they would not discharge her with a monitor. And so after 4 days, they told me that I had nothing to worry about, and they sent her home without an apnea monitor written in her chart that she didn't have central apnea after that sleep study. So we went back to the doctor after she was discharged, and I didn't know it said that in her chart. I would have been really angry. And I asked her doctor to give us a monitor, and she was afraid that the insurance wouldn't want to pay for another sleep study. It all had to do with the insurance. And so then she said that she would send a referral for a second opinion. And if we hadn't heard from the children's hospital that was an hour away in a week, to call back. And I hadn't, so I called back, and the referral hadn't been set yet. And in another week I hadn't heard, so I called again, and the referral person was sick. And so in another week, but that it would be sent, in another week I called again. And to make a long story sort of shorter, it took me 4 weeks before I got the referral sent to the children's hospital. And at the end of 4 weeks, after 4 phone calls, I finally got it sent. And within a day, when the pulmonologist's office finally did get the referral and saw her sleep study, they called us. They got her in the next day, and they got her a monitor ordered that day. They were horrified that she was not on a monitor. And the day after that, she was in for a sleep study, which confirmed that she had central apnea. Slightly milder the second time. She had 36 central apneas, and she had less hypopneas. She didn't need to be on oxygen at that point. And so we went home with a monitor, and I thought that I thought that we would be believed after that, and I thought that we were safe, that we would keep our monitor, and that the spite at least was over, which was a little bit naive. I definitely didn't understand quite how it all worked. It was the beginning of the testing. She was sent for an MRI to see if her brainstem was causing it, and it wasn't her brainstem. We were worried she had something called congenital central hypoventilation syndrome, and when the genetics testing came back, it showed that that was not what was causing her to stop breathing, which was wonderful news. That was the biggest thing. That was the hugest concern, and that was a huge relief when we found out that wasn't it. And so we pretty much just were hoping, have been hoping, that somehow it was some sort of prematurity, that even though she was born at really close to 40 weeks, and even though she was 8 pounds 12 ounces and close to 22 inches, for some reason her brain was a little bit premature. Her brain did show a little bit of a hemorrhage in the MRI that I found out. I kind of laughed a little bit because I didn't find out about that until I saw it in the geneticist's report, because it wasn't supposedly clinically significant, but when the pulmonologist, when her doctor called and asked about it, the pulmonologist said they don't know that that isn't the cause of it for sure. So, but it shouldn't be clinically significant according to all the reports. But yeah, when I saw that in the report, I totally freaked out and called everybody. No one could really tell me what was going on. So the latest was, that I didn't understand when we got the monitor, and I was so relieved, and I thought from here on out she would be okay, was that she has to requalify for that monitor every 6 months. So when she has each appointment, they basically say, let's make an appointment for the next sleep study to check and see how she's doing. And when I was a newbie mom at this, I didn't realize that that sleep study determines whether or not she gets that monitor taken away. And everyone acts like that's a very, very happy thing, which, I mean, I guess it would be a very, very happy thing if I hadn't seen her have multiple events where she stops breathing, the monitor goes off, she doesn't start breathing again on her own, I have to come in and rub her little chest, rub her little back, and get her to start breathing again, and have her like finally gasp after multiple times rubbing her chest. So the idea of her being off that monitor is terrifying. Last time it happened in July, it happened in August, and then it happened again last month after they tried to take the monitor away. In October, she had a great sleep study. She had a great sleep study being that they had us come in October, and she had a sleep study in which she only had 15 apneas. She only stopped breathing 15 times, and she only had like 8 hypopneas, and she only went down to her oxygen desaturation, only went down to like 89%, and everyone's so happy. This is so good. And we're taking her monitor away. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But it was only like a month ago, the last time that she had her incident where she stopped breathing, and I came in the room because the alarm was going off and she wasn't breathing, and I had to rub her chest really, really hard to get her to start breathing again. And it was terrifying. You're taking her monitor away. No, no. And I called like 3 times to try to get them not to. And my husband called, and he called twice and spoke with a doctor, and they wouldn't agree to not take the prescription back. They called and they said that the prescription had been taken away, and the monitor company started calling. The monitor company came by and left a thing saying they had come to pick up her monitor. I went in and asked how much it would cost for us to buy the monitor, and it was over $10,000. And by the way, we don't sell it. We especially don't sell it when your child doesn't have a prescription. I was panicked. I was saying things like, they can pry this monitor out of my cold, dead hands. And I made an appointment for her to see her pediatrician, and her pediatrician made a phone call. The pulmonologist said, fine, we'll do one more sleep study. He was humoring me. He was probably humoring our pediatrician too. We'll do one, and the pediatrician said, do you know what causes it? And they said no. Basically, they were claiming that it was prematurity, and that by the time they get down to 15 central apneas, most babies have outgrown it, and that she should have basically outgrown it. He said, well, do you know that it's caused by prematurity? And they don't. They don't know that that's why she has central apnea. And so he said we would give it one more try, and if it's normal twice, it's 99.9999999% chance that she's fine and that I have nothing to worry about. But really, they were humoring me by doing a second one. No one thought it was going to be anything. And so we went back again for another sleep study, and she had another night totally taped up. She despises sleep studies. I mean, she's like a year and a half old. She's a toddler. She hates being covered in tape and having a nasal cannula shoved up her nose. But we did it. And we survived, and it seemed like another totally uneventful night. I saw absolutely nothing. I went home thinking, what are the chances? I've seen her have 2 bad nights all summer. What are the chances that she had a bad night while we were there, and that they actually got it, and that she's going to get to keep the machine that she needs? And I was totally panicked. And the next day, I got a call from the pulmonologist's office saying that she'd had 13 central apneas, and I was sitting here thinking, are we calling to gloat that they're taking her monitor away? This is it? That she'd had 13 central apneas, but that she'd had multiple hypoxias, and she'd had DSATs down to 83, and that she was going to be put on oxygen, and that the medical supply company would be there with an oxygen machine soon. And she is now on oxygen at night when she doesn't rip it out of her nose 20 times, because it's very, very hard to keep it on her. And that is where we are now. And I'm still really, really scared of what's going to happen the next time. Because when she's good, and we don't know what's causing it still. I become more and more skeptical that it is because she's premature. She's my super active 18-month-olds. Her doctor is becoming more skeptical of the claim now that it's prematurity. Now that she's gone from not being on oxygen to on oxygen. And that is our central apnea journey so far. And I was going to be folding this laundry while I was talking, and that did not happen. And hopefully, the dream is that someday I will be able to say, it really was, they were right. It was because of prematurity, and she has outgrown it, and this is all just a distant memory, and I'm not hooking her up to a chest strap and oxygen and a oxygen saturation little strapper on her foot every single night, because that would be wonderful. It would only be wonderful if she really, really wasn't having any of these scary incidents anymore. And I don't know how long that has to be before we would actually feel safe. It's really hard to imagine feeling safe with her asleep, because it's happened so many times now, if that makes sense. I don't know. And that is my Tessie story of Tessie and her central apnea, and at 18 months. It has been a bumpy 18 months, but I am really, really grateful that we have made it from the time when she was a little teeny tiny newborn and we had no idea what was going on, to her being our curly-haired 18-month-old bouncing around, running around, being wild.
You having a snack, Tessie?
Are you?
She had a really long nap. She just woke up from her nap.
Tessie, guess what? You cannot play with Maggie's iPad because you're a baby.
She's okay with that. She doesn't know what an iPad